Extremely lucky. I feel very fortunate today to be sitting down with Adam Torel, founder of Third Window Films. And you've been doing it now since 2006, 5, 6. Is that right, Adam?
2005 is when I started it up. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great. And so you actually live in Japan, is that right?
I do. I moved here around 2012 to when I co-produced the film The Land of Hope by Shion Sono. I moved over here and that for the first couple of years I was sort of back and forth, but then I've been pretty much here ever since 2014 or so.
Wow. Well, it's a dream of mine to live in Japan or at least to visit for an extended time. I think mostly actually through the cinema of Ozu and Kurosawa and even now, modern days, even someone like Miyake, there's a love of Japan. And there's a appreciation for I think some of the smaller cities and villages, and there's kind of a beauty to it that I've always been fascinated by. I know a lot of people when they love Japan, they kind of come to it through anime. I've actually never seen any anime, but or at least I don't really watch it much. But I love the culture and the people and especially the food. So I think it's cool you're able to make a life over there.
I'm the same also, actually. I'm completely uninterested in manga and anime and a lot of the things, yes, people do associate with those who are very into Japanese culture, and I'm the complete opposite. I'm very into just like the old-fashioned culture of Japan, not the sort of Kyoto and Nara, but like the sort of early Showa period and mid Showa period. And when I go out in Tokyo or anywhere else in Japan, if I go out drinking or something like that, it's always with like old people in like rundown shoten guys, like very very cheap standing bars, nothing new, nobody young. It's That's what I really like about Japan, is that sort of culture still being around. I mean, obviously it's dying out, but yeah, there's just so much, I guess, so many different parts of Japanese culture that are great to explore. And as long as I've been here, I'm finding new things all the time. And I'm also glad I've been here during the pandemic, because it's obviously one of the safest places due to
Yeah.
Japanese people following all the rules and wearing masks. So I'm very happy that because I'm English, and if I'd been in England, it wouldn't have been as easy for sure.
Well, actually, so without making this a podcast about spirituality, just at a very high level, I'm curious because that's one of the actual elements you kind of touched on this in what you just said. But from the outsider kind of perspective looking in, it feels like a lot of the traditions, maybe like Japanese traditions, are very tied to kind of history and ancestry and spirituality. Like that's very closely rooted. Is that do you see that still at all, or is that perception even correct, I guess?
I think tradition is maybe less spirituality, more the concept of tradition itself, and the concept of keeping things the way they are. And that's can be a very positive, and it can also be a negative, and it's a very negative in the film sense as well, because Japanese companies like are very, very old fashioned, and they're very hard to work with both as a distributor and a producer. I mean, it's I'm really pull my hair out so almost every single day trying to work with Japanese companies, and that's obviously something that I learned a lot when I came to Japan. I mean, obviously it hasn't changed anything, but I understand why the Japanese companies are hard to work with by knowing more about them and for working longer with them. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of positives and negatives, and yes, I do find more negatives in the work that I'm doing, unfortunately.
well, these negatives still produce some amazing releases. So thank you for doing the hard work. So all we get to see is the finished product. Um, that might be a good tie-in. So my understanding, I'm just curious to kind of from your perspective on this, that you were working with the Tartan at the time. They had a big line called Asia Extreme, right?
Yeah.
And I actually remember that I owned, I don't know, several dozen of those titles. I loved actually that line. Um, Back in kind of 2001, 2, 3-ish, that time frame. I feel like it was when it was quite popular. And then you had this perception that the films that were coming out of Japan and kind of out of Asia to America were maybe more of the exploitation sense, or maybe more of the kind of the extreme, not necessarily representing a lot of the beauty that was being produced through the films in both Japan as well as kind of Asia. Or is this so? Am I right? Like that you felt like there was kind of a huge population of filmmaking that was not being represented in the West, and there might be an opportunity to be that voice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was a teenager, I actually lived in the States myself, and I worked at a video rental shop in Florida called Video Renaissance, which was one of the most unknown best video stores in the whole of the world. Actually, there we had about 40,000 films, 40,000.
Wow.
This was an owner that had since the 80s just bought every single videotape that he could buy. He bought everything. And he just never threw anything away. So we had all these films that were out of print, and never made it DVD, never made it across to any other formats, and just he was just an obsessive collector. And I worked there, and being there, I could watch films all day, all night, and I was completely immersed in cinema. And I got into Asian cinema around the same time. A bit earlier, I've been working at a few cinemas as well, and the concept of distribution became very apparent to me. Like, why can I only see a certain number of films? Why is it that only a few companies are distributing only a few sorts of films? And that was also around the time that the Tartan were very big in England, and we would buy obviously discs from England, and then or VHS from England, and then rent them through our shop as well. And that's how I got into to Tartan Asia Extreme. And then I moved back to England, and I started working for them, but at first as an intern and then full time but only for about a year. And it did sort of disillusion me to the fact that my idea of Tartan and Tartan Asia Extreme as a fan was just like in complete admiration of what they were doing and the films they were putting out. But then when I started working for them, you realize that like there's not really many people within the company that actually really care about the films they're releasing, and it's almost just because they're exploitive titles and because they're extreme titles, they're easy to sell. And it's like, do you love Asian cinema? Do you want to promote Asian cinema, Japanese cinema, or do you just want to sort of promote these sort of like crazy titles because you think they're going to sell and they're going to be sort of out there? And of course, that was a fantastic market, but it's quite a small market. Even Japan doesn't make that many actually of these Asia Extreme titles. It's only a few directors that were doing it. And I was talking to the owner, and I was like, look, or even if you want to do this sort of Asia Extreme brand, like there's still so many other great films that could fit into that, like Kurosawa Kiyoshi, films like Pulse. But because they weren't really had the same sort of maybe even knowledge or passion about Japanese cinema as I did, we just butted heads, and I left, and I thought, well, I'll do it myself. So I sort of I started Third Window Films in 2005, and started trying to acquire titles that were at first sort of mixing up, like films like Lee Chang-dong's Greenfish, like there was sort of genre films but also like artistic films, or even films like No Blood No Tears that were action films but Liu Sang-wang was like getting very big at the time, and I was doing that with Korean films. And then I thought maybe I should also, what I really truly love is Japanese films. So let me try to get some Japanese films that like Memories of Matsuko, Kamikaze Girls, Miki Satoshi films, like comedies, and see what they would, how they would work. And they actually ended up doing better than the Korean films I had initially bought, maybe because they were so unique and because there wasn't a market compared to the Korean films that were getting big at the time.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned in that same interview that I'd heard that somebody gave you the idea for the title of Third Window. And so that was essentially saying, I didn't quite understand though. Do you mind possibly, kind of explaining the origin of that?
Yeah, actually, that's I don't know if maybe you read it wrong or I spoke it wrong at the time, but no, actually the title was just I'm a record collector as well of Northern Soul records. Quite obscure 60s and 70s soul music that was popular in England. And there was, the thing about Northern Soul is that sometimes there's songs that aren't soulful at all, but they sort of fit into this genre of Northern Soul, including a song by Dean Barlow called Third Window from the Right. And that was he was a backing member of Buddy Holly's Crickets, and he sang this soul song that it's a sort of blue-eyed soul, but it's mainly just like a bit crap pop, and it was quite popular on the Northern Soul scene. And I quite liked it at the time, and I had the record, of course. And So I called the company Third Window Films because the song was called Third Window of the Right, and I used the song in the initial logo, animated logo. That if you have any of the old DVDs, you'll see. I actually didn't have the copyright for it, so I removed it after a while. I think I got a bit of a warning to not using it, and that's why that song is not was stopped being used after a while.
Okay, okay, that's great. I'm glad I asked. Um, that's wonderful. Okay, so then you got started. You realized the Japanese films were selling better, and that was exciting for you because you liked that you liked them better, anyways. And then did you? I feel like the films that I kind of got to know you through, because I think I mentioned this even in the email. I remember renting. I don't know what year it was, 2007 or 8 in that time frame. I remember renting a film called PTU that came out, that I believe was one of yours. And I that's kind of, I got to know you through a lot of this Asian cinema. But I don't remember. Was there a time where you decided to focus much more heavily into Japanese films? Was it kind of around that time, or?
I mean, personally, yes. I mean, when I really first got into Asian cinema before I got into Japanese and Korean cinema, I was Hong Kong films. When I was about 13, 14 years old, I really was got into Ringo Lam, John Woo Choi Hark, and all that sort of classic Hong Kong films from the early 90s. And of course, after that, obviously became Johnny To. So I was very happy to have been able to release a film like PTU. But those Hong Kong cinema at the time was obviously very popular, as was Korean cinema. And those films were very expensive to acquire, and they didn't do well at all. I think there obviously was already a market for those films, and that's why they were so expensive. But I guess when you're dealing with films, especially action films, and Korean action films are a good example of that, people do sort of compare them to what they try to be themselves, which is, I mean, maybe more in Korean films, like Hollywood films. And therefore, if you're trying to sell those films, I think you'd think they'd be an easier sell because good action should be an easier sell. But I think the sales agents obviously know that as well, and it became quite I lost a lot of money with the first few films, including PTU. It wasn't popular at all, or it didn't make the money that it cost to put out. So that's also what sort of changed my way of thinking, in the way that, well, I do really want to get these sort of Japanese quirky comedies out. I didn't think there was going to be a market for them, but I thought there's probably less risk because they're less expensive, and you know
Yeah.
maybe their uniqueness and their originality of these films like Memories of Matsuko and Kamikaze Girls and those sort of quirky comedies might be something that just makes them, obviously it's a very niche market, but it's a untapped market. And I'd also obviously be more happy releasing those sorts of films, and that's sort of what turned me away from focusing more on the sort of Johnny To and Hong Kong films, which, because it was just really hard to work with those Hong Kong companies as well.
Interesting. And in special effects, there's that concept of like uncanny valley, where it's so close to the real thing, but it's off, and you can tell, and something in the brain triggers you that it's not right. Maybe when you're describing these films that are like Hollywood but not quite Hollywood, maybe there's something there, like kind of an uncanny valley situation going on where people didn't know what to do with it, but maybe with the comedies they were so different that people could just kind of sit back and like relax and not have any expectations or something.
Yeah, expectations is a
Yeah.
big thing. I mean, if you're gonna have something that's told to you, like for example, with No Blood No Tears, some critic was comparing it to something like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, which it is very comparable if you watch the film, but it's very different in the fact that Snatch and Lock, Stock are quite, even though they're small budget films, they're still much bigger budget films and have a much larger reach because they're English, and they're more stylish, and it is, that's just what an audience would, I guess, would think of. I mean, maybe if the original films were very, very cheap to acquire, then it would have been more profitable and easier to do. But the Koreans knew what they were doing. They were in a very big wave at the time because it was after Old Boy, and Korean cinema was very popular at the time. So it wasn't cheap, and it was very complicated. And yes, that sort of moved me on to the Japanese.
There's an interesting parallel with the way you're describing your career, and I think what I'm hearing, we've been very fortunate to speak with a number of people now that are starting labels that are kind of young in their journey, right? That are new in their journey. Crescendo House, I think Era 44, which you have at least some type of relationship with through the Funky Forest release, right? I don't know exactly what that is, but there's a few of these labels where they maybe put out one or maybe two Deaf Crocodile is another one, although that's a bit different. But I'm finding this interesting parallel in what you describe, in that, when you jump into this game of distribution and rights acquisitions and special features and manufacturing, it just seems like there's a lot of lessons to learn. So what was when you jumped in, was the transition smooth, or did you take some hard knocks? And was it how was that when you first got going?
Yes, as you mentioned, Crescendo, I spoke to Jason a few weeks ago, and I've been speaking to the Era 444 guys a lot and working with them. And I wish that it was that somebody had been there to tell me all the pitfalls and all the ways around it, because they're very young people as well. And but the market has changed a lot in that time, and it's become, I don't know if you could say it is sort of easier in a way. I mean, obviously the market is smaller than it was when I started. But I think there's also the sales agents, the people that you're buying films from, the production companies also realize that the market is smaller, and and therefore the films aren't as expensive as they used to be. I got into it also at a time that it was sort of like just past the peak of Asian cinema boom in England. So if it had been a few years before, then maybe I could have got on at the beginning. But Asian films were being sold for big money. But it was also at a time that the market had been oversaturated by companies like Tartan, and therefore, the prices to buy the films were high, but the market was less than the price actually worked out with. So, also obviously the change between different formats over the years. I mean, obviously DVD was cheaper to make, but actually still quite expensive at the time. And it's obviously it's hard for me also to remember exactly all the ins and outs that had happened a long time ago. But it was very, very complicated, and it took a long time to really learn and get properly sorted. I think obviously like Era 444 and Crescendo House, they're also having to work with middlemen in order to get their films manufactured, in order to get them onto Amazon and all these other places. And there was less selling direct to customer and more needing to go to middlemen into stores as well. Real high street retailers and rental and Amazon and all that. And those middlemen are the people that I got screwed over a lot with. And also I'm sure Crescendo and other companies like them have also had these sort of similar issues. It does take a long time. I think unless you learn it all for years at other companies and then go on your own, I think it's really hard to start off without having so much experience, and you can only sort of learn from failures, and I had many.
Well, that's interesting, yeah, because nowadays it's very easy to sell from a web store, for example. But before, I'd imagine you were dealing with maybe like Tower Records and HMV and a lot of those kind of buyers, and it just that's probably a completely different profit margin, even, right? Even if you are selling quantities, it's just there's no money in it basically at that point.
Yeah, you have to sell just like tens of thousands of units, because yes, the margins are so small, and those margins are eaten into by the companies that put the middlemen, obviously, because you can't just go to Tower Records and say, like, can you take my DVDs? You do need to have these middlemen that get them into the stores for you, but also take their margins on top of the other margins. So it's tough. And also, this was before Facebook and all these and Twitter and all these other things. So, marketing as well. Nowadays you can, in essence, market for free. I mean, obviously, because everyone's marketing on the internet, there's a lot of noise out there, but you could, in essence, market to people for free and then sell it through your web store at very, very low margins. So you could make a lot more profit to what obviously we had to do, because at that time, it's advertising in magazines and all that. It was a very different time, and it was a very hard time for an independent. It's a lot easier, I think, as an independent now, even if the market is probably smaller.
Well, speaking, I guess, coming up to a little bit more modern days now, it feels like, at least again from the outside in, one of the reasons I was so excited to speak with you, other than having known your label for quite some time, was it feels like you're hitting your stride in a big way. And I hope that is okay to say. I mean, not to say that the sales weren't there before, that the label hasn't had a great reputation for many years, but every release that's coming out now just seems to be hitting on all the Reddit boards, on all the message boards. People are excited about these limited editions. They're hard to find. The Toyota box set that just came out was beautiful. The Obayashi box set that came out is beautiful. So as you know, are you moving? Is this an intentional move to kind of get into these limited editions, these kind of bigger boxes? Is this something that is thoughtful, or is it just a coincidence of timing that you had access to certain of these filmographies and wanted to put these up?
To be very frank, I do understand the hitting the stride is mainly because I've been, to be honest, I'm speaking of myself, but I used to prefer to, and I release the type of films that I used to release, like these films that didn't really have much potential in essence. Films like Miki Satoshi, tiny Japanese quirky comedies, or films like Fine, Totally Fine. These are the films that I really love to distribute. And maybe the films that are making my company more popular now are films that, to be very frank, they're films that I like, but I always wanted to do a company of releasing films that wouldn't get released otherwise. And the films that are obviously the big sellers, are films like, for example, like the Takashi Kitano films that I bought and released. Now, of course, I was the first person to put them out on Blu-ray, but somebody would have done it. So I really didn't think there was a reason for me to do it as a distributor. I mean, obviously there's a business reason to do it, but I was never really that focused on sort of the bottom line in essence, because I'm not a company that has staff and offices and have all these overheads. I just do this as a sort of love. So I don't really, as much as like Hanabi is actually one of my favorite films of all time, I never really thought, I didn't think there was a reason for me to put it out. And that film, those Kitano films were actually helped by Gareth Evans, the director of The Raid. He was a big fan of Third Window films and wanted me to put them out and actually put the money forward to get them out there. So
Oh, wow.
So thanks to him, I put them out, and that sort of changed actually the way that the company worked, because it turned out to be getting these more sort of easy to sell titles. Like of course I love Hiroko the Goblin and a lot of the Tsukamoto films, but as I like with the Kitano films, somebody probably would release them, and they have been released in other territories as well. So, but I mean, obviously that's why the company is more popular now, is because it's more genre titles as well, and it's more classic titles instead of like a brand new tiny Japanese film that no one's heard of. It's like a classic film that everyone has heard of, like Hiroko the Goblin, Crazy Thunder Road, Funky Forest, even the Obayashis. Obayashi is a big name, so they're more sellable titles, and I don't really have as much passion towards releasing them. To be very frank, I mean, it's not like I'm releasing films that I don't like, or don't really I'm sort of anti against releasing them, but it's a bit different than I used to feel. And I think that's mainly because there isn't as many good Japanese films to release nowadays, as in new films. And I talk a lot with Stefan Holl, who runs Rapid Eye Movies, because I work with him a lot and I've admired him for many years. And the two of us are distributors of sort of minor Japanese and minor Asian films in the West. And we're always talking about, well, we just can't find any good films to release. And therefore, to continue just releasing films, we have to go and get back catalog titles just so that... So if there were more films out there, then I probably wouldn't release all these like films like Hiroko the Goblin. But it's I still put an effort into releasing them, but I'd rather release like a tiny film like Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes or something like that, or some even more smaller comedy or something.
So how are you curating new titles now? Is it mostly festivals? Is that where you're discovering new talent right now?
No, actually, I also work because I have as a distributor, you can only do so much, and that also requires you to work with people like sales agents and big companies, and it's a real pain, to be honest. And you're only given a finished product and maybe a shit poster or something like that, and told you can't do something else with the title. So I got into production years ago, and that helped me to work from the very zero. The beginning. And then I also got into handling sales for films, in which I work on behalf of the filmmaker or the producer to bring the film to film festivals and then sell the film internationally. And doing that, gives me the sort of advantage to see films way before festivals, because obviously I'm submitting to film festivals. And examples of some is like One Cut of the Dead. One Cut of the Dead was a film that I got from the producer and director way before it was released in Japan, and I brought that to film festivals and sold it. And recently, Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes is another one where I've done the same thing, and it allows me also to obviously make the posters and make the marketing materials and all that. So that's mainly how I work nowadays. So when it comes to film festivals, there might be titles that I'm thinking of releasing that I'm on the fence of, and then somebody might bring them to film festival, and the reaction there might sort of give me a little more push to actually acquire that title for distribution. But otherwise, yes, there'll be titles like One Cut of the Dead or Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes that I'll bring to film festivals in order to create the promotion, so that when I do release it myself, it'll be already in people's minds. So it's a bit of a sort of one stop does everything type of situation.
That's great. That was One Cut from the Dead was actually one of the movies that I had questions about. So you answered a lot of the ones that I had, kind of how that went about. So you actually got involved with that project as it was finished, and you helped kind of get it out to the world, much more than just the packaging. Like, you were the sales agent as well for that. And
yeah, I brought that to 150 film festivals with 3 DCPs, because I wanted to keep all the costs down for the producer as well. And I think a lot of people don't realize also the problem with why many Japanese films don't get overseas is because sales agents and these major companies that hold the rights to films ask for just absurd demands, even for a film festival screening. I also program for film festivals, and I might want a title, even if it's just a straight up drama that doesn't really have that much potential. These major companies will say, if you want to play it once, it'll cost you $1,500 for one-time screening. And it's well, cinema has 200 seats, that's impossible, And they're that's our rule, and that film will end up just not going anywhere. So
yeah,
even if it was One Cut of the Dead, if it had been a studio that had handled that film, it wouldn't have gone anywhere as far as it did. I mean, as a buyer myself, when I'm looking at things from all these different angles, as a festival programmer, as a seller, and as a buyer, I can see what markets have what potential, and what film festivals suit which film, and the fact you need to get a certain films into certain film festivals in order to sell it internationally. And these sales agents don't really think that way, so they kill the chances of many films getting out there, and it's very annoying, unfortunately. It's the reason why most people don't see the vast majority of Japanese films.
I'm just, as I hear you talk, I hope this comes. I'm so impressed. I don't know. I hope it's not condescending, but I'm just so impressed with the wisdom you've built up over the years, and how natural and fluent you are in every aspect of bringing this film to life. Have you ever considered writing a book, or do you think you'll ever write a book on this? And or how are you, other than being generous and giving your time to new distribution houses, how are you getting this knowledge out there and helping other people appreciate cinema the right ways?
I'm just doing as much as I can, to be honest. I don't have time to write a book. It takes me about 3 days to watch a movie nowadays. I've got a young baby as well, and I'm doing all these I've got no staff, and I'm trying to release a film every month, and also make the extra features for the films, do the subtitles for it, do every single aspect that I can myself in order to bring the cost down. But I think it's important. It really pisses me off, actually, when sales agents for a Japanese company don't understand what they're doing. In essence, they should, in my opinion, a sales agent should understand every single market they're working with, and all the distributors within that market, and the way of distribution within that market, because if they don't, they can't properly understand how they should sell a film. And a producer is the same. If a producer doesn't understand just the way that a film would be released after that film is made, then I don't think he should be a producer. And of course, in the West, I think people work in a similar way than me. They tend to understand or try to understand as much of a market as possible. But in Japan, they don't work like that. So a producer will only know how to raise the money. He won't know how to edit or for example, or understand the concept of editing to get a good flow for the film when it's finished, or the way that it should be marketed. And a marketing person won't understand distribution, and a distributor won't understand, production and this and that. So, it's
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's just it's rational that, and if you should understand every single aspect as much as you can, because if you don't, then you're not doing your job correctly, and you won't be able to fully maximize. For example, if you produce a film, to maximize the profit, if you don't understand the distribution, if you don't understand film festivals, if you don't understand editing, if you don't understand these sorts of things. So I just, over the years, try to learn as much as I can by doing everything. So even I distribute within Japan as well. I distribute films within Japan because so that I can know the Japanese market as well, and I distribute and I handle film festivals so I can know that market. And I just think it's important to know everything you can in order to work. But of course, because I'm knowing so many things, I'm not sort of don't know so much about each one, to be honest. So I'm doing a bit of a, yes, so this the jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing. So I know a lot about various things, but if I had focused properly on distribution as solely, or properly on production solely, then I probably could do each one better. But I might not know about the other aspects. So it's a sort of balance that I'm constantly trying to figure out.
Well, this is the thing about independent film producing, though, right? I mean, I think that as you talked about the situation, or the organizational structure that you just laid out, where there's like a marketing expert, and there's like a, maybe a design expert, and maybe there's a finance expert, and all that. That's just bloated cost, right? And
Exactly.
if you're a massive studio, I mean, you can kind of get away with it because you need it. I mean, you can't produce Spider-Man No Way Home with one person. That's silly, right? Of course, you need like an army behind it. But for the world, I mean, as you talk, I'm hearing. Have you ever read Lloyd Kaufman's book, Make Your Own Damn Movie?
I
Um,
haven't, or if I did, it was a very, very long time ago.
yeah, I mean, it's whatever. But Trauma. I'm not trying to compare what you're doing with Trauma, but I just think there's the spirit. There's a similar spirit there in saying like, no, you can do all this stuff. Like, it's not like this. If you just apply yourself like to the production and to the marketing and to all these things, like you get to, over time, you get to see how the system works, and you get a sense of how to market the films you produce, and like you get a sense of how to cut corners and costs, because that's what ultimately matters to get margins. And I mean, anyways, there's just there's a similar kind of I don't know, renegade or kind of rebel spirit in a lot of what you're saying that I love. I mean, I don't think you're doing it for the purpose of being rebellious, but I think you're just saying like, I want to learn the right way to do it. That's kind of what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, I just don't think I think you shouldn't have to count on other people. I think you should. It's more interesting, and it's more fun to just, and it provides more knowledge if you learn it all yourself. I mean, if you were to, of course, that takes time, and that comes to experience. But if you were to hire a company like to market your film, then you're not going to learn how to market your film. You go unless you initially hire them, then you watch every single thing they do, and then you steal all their press contacts, and then you use it the next time for yourself. And it's all just sort of that. I mean, obviously I didn't know how to design artwork initially, because I never went to school for any of those sort of things. And then I hired somebody to do it, and then I said, can you send me all like the layered files? And I started like looking through the layers and reading books at the same time. Okay, this is how you put a layer on it, and this is how you cut this out, and okay, I'm going to use that from this one. And then asking somebody to edit out like a trailer, or a making of, and it's like sit next to him and then watch it, and then just okay, and then you go back home. And obviously now there's YouTube, where you can just play like, how do you put like a mosaic into it, and then it just tells you, and then you copy it, and then okay, now I know how to make a mosaic or something like that. And it's I just think that it's better to know everything yourself, and it's more fun. It's quicker, obviously, because I don't have so much time. So if I can do it now in this second, then it's a lot quicker than having to wait for somebody to do it for me, and cheaper, obviously.
So I didn't know that, but just to make sure I'm hearing you right, all you do all your own artwork now?
I don't do the like, for example, with the Obayashi illustrated one. I'm not that talented, unfortunately. But everything that has to do with the layouts. Also, if a lot of the artwork comes from Japan initially, and in terms of like putting it in the right dimensions, changing it if it's a quad poster or something like that, or a Blu-ray, or if it's simple artwork, simple designs, then yes, I'll do it. But usually, yeah, so the majority of the time I do it, but sometimes if it's like a nice, like, illustrated artwork, for like the Tsukamoto films or something like that, then yes, I'll hire somebody to do it, because but I'm sure maybe I'll just have to learn and do it myself. I mean, it takes it. I think a talent is obviously something I don't have. So, but if it can be done with skill, then I can learn it, I guess.
Or maybe there's an AI program where you can like take an art and recreate it.
Yeah, in time.
That's great. Well, so one of the questions that that everybody's always asking on a lot of the boards, as for a lot of the different distribution houses, is this transition to 4K, right? So, is that something that's on your radar? Is it something you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, to be very honest, and I'm a film lover, and I'm not a format lover in a sense. A DVD is fine with me, a VHS is fine with me. I understand that people nowadays, because of better televisions and because of obviously other companies making things in 4K and all that sort of stuff, that they're becoming more used to that. But in my opinion, first of all, Blu-ray was a massive step up from DVD, and it's high definition. And I don't think that you really need 4K unless it's like Avatar or something like that. And especially, I'm dealing with like Japanese films that are made for like $50,000. Like that is it's going to look no different than even like DVD to like Blu-ray, like let alone that 4K. And especially if it's these are films that if you're dealing with something that was like shot on 16mm, which a lot of them I did it's you can only make it so much better, and the source material is a big aspect of that. And I can't do the cost in Japan, they still only do 2K scans, so then it's just upscaling and stuff like that. And that's a huge amount of extra cost for something that I just hope that I can stay as long as I can hold out as long as I can in Blu-ray. I mean, I held out for as long as I could in DVD, and but that was a big step up. So I understand that, but 4K is like, I just hope that like Blu-ray stays for a little longer, because I'm really actually stressed out recently, because I don't want to have to do that. I really don't want to have to do the 4K route, and I just hope that the Blu-ray. I mean, I personally, I don't know the difference. I don't have a good enough television. I guess I still go to watch most of my films in the cinema. So, maybe I'm not representative of the people who buy my titles, or who. but this is my company, so I can only be as representative of my company as I can, I guess.
No, I mean, I think that's a great quote, though. I love the films, not the format. I think that there is a tendency in these discussion boards to get so caught up in the discussion of the format that you forget there's a film behind it sometimes. And people might say like, oh, well, but it's a discussion about seeing the film in the highest quality or whatever. But to your point, I mean, I'm going through, one of the things I'm watching through right now is Arrow Video put out this H.G. Lewis box set that's like 14 of his movies. And the highest budget that he ever made was $60,000, right? Most of his films were for about $10,000 to $20,000. I don't think I'll buy the 4K of that, even if they just come out one day. Like, I'm okay. Like, I'm seeing it on Blu-ray. That's fine. I think I'm kind of with you on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, luckily, just Japanese cinema is not really the type of cinema that it would make any difference. I mean, I do honestly think that a lot of people, yes, are getting too caught up in these the formats, and even the extras and the packaging. Sometimes people like returning stuff because there's like a crease in the zip place. Like they don't understand that when they return a disc like that, it's in essence it costs me like 3 times as much, because they return it to like Amazon like throw it away, but return the money plus like give a new one, which has to be, and so I lose like the sale of like 2 of them, and all the margins in between, and all the return costs as well, just for like a like a crease. I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, like, why did you buy? I mean, I don't want to sort of offend the people that are buying these discs of mine, but I wouldn't. I'd appreciate it if people understood that I'm trying to put these films out, these films that are not available for the most part in any other format or anywhere else in the world. You know, I mean, there's a lot going into them, and I do as much as I can to keep the prices low. And I wish I could bring them lower, but Arrow takes such a bloody massive margin that it's hard to. But you know, I do hope that yes, people appreciate the films a little more than the formats, and I hope people don't get angry at me for trying to fight that corner.
Well, I'm just trying to think of, if speaking of Arrow, I forget exactly when they opened their doors, but they were doing dual format DVD Blu-ray till 2018, maybe.
I've still done it, to be honest. Actually, I've still got a few out recently, dual formats. I mean, I stopped doing them maybe last year or the year before, but there are people that still buy DVDs, especially in Japan, because Japanese still don't buy Blu-rays. They're still old-fashioned, still bloody VHS over here. But you know,
Well, I was just thinking though, in terms of fighting the 4K battle, if there was, 7 or 8 years of dual format, maybe you've got a good 7 or 8 years left of Blu-ray before everybody's TV is converted. Maybe you don't have to fight that battle for a long time, anyways.
it's unfortunate
Um,
also me living in Japan. I think that does sort of skew my thoughts, because Japan is very old fashioned. It's not everybody thinks of Japan as this very sort of technologically advanced culture, and it is. They like to make technology, but they don't like to use it. I think many Japanese still use the flip, the Galaxy they call it here. I forget what they call it. The flip phones that don't have the pre-smartphones. Um,
okay.
I mean, my wife still uses one, and many people in Japan still use them. And Blu-ray is not a big thing here. It's still DVD is the majority, and people go to the cinema over anything else, and video on demand is not a big thing here either. So I think that unfortunately, being in this situation does sort of screw the way that my understanding of the market, unfortunately.
Well, it doesn't seem to be hurting you right now, as far as I can tell. Again, just from the outside looking in, it seems like your limited editions are selling out. At least through the channels that makes it easy to buy in the US. It seems like they're selling out very quickly. So I
But they're
hope.
not. They're not. Unfortunately, they're still talking about very low sales. Considering that, for example, like the Toyota set is like the only way to watch those films in the world. That's like 600 copies that it sold. Or 700 copies. I mean,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, Obayashi is about 700 copies. I mean, a lot of them, they really scrape. They're lucky to get 1,000 copies sold for the majority of films that I release. I mean, Taste of Tea was like, that's the only copy of, even it's not even available in Japan on Blu-ray. That sold 1,200 copies over like 2-3 years. And that's within sales, where it sometimes goes for like, £10 or less. So, these aren't unfortunately big sellers. And if you think about how many people there are in the world, even within a niche formats of DVD buyers and Blu-ray buyers, 1,000 copies is not a lot of copies sold of a film where it may be the only version in the world. So it's still not Arrow. Well, obviously nowhere near Arrow's levels, but even Arrow's like small titles levels.
Well, I appreciate your candor on that. That's interesting. That's certainly, I think, yeah, that's interesting to hear. I don't know. I'm sorry to hear that. I know I hope that does change, and I hope that these titles sell out for you, so you can continue to expand and put out more. Do you feel that? I guess that comment notwithstanding, one of the questions I was curious about is, do you feel that it's better now than it was, let's say, 11, 12, 13, those years where it got pretty lean? Do you at least see it kind of improving in terms of sales, and is that better?
Well, back in the days, I was selling, especially like even obviously DVD. I mean, a few thousand copies of many titles, and nowadays, it's lucky to get 1,000. So obviously, those were DVDs which were a lot cheaper to make than Blu-rays. I mean, a Blu-ray, obviously you have the cost of the film, which if I were to remove the cost of the film, just the cost of certifying it with the BBFC to author the Blu-ray, manufacture the Blu-rays, like just the like you'd have to sell like 500-600 just to break even of those on top costs, and plus then you'd have the cost of acquiring the film, and even that's obviously cheaper than it used to be. But let's say if you acquire a film for, I don't know, like £3,000-4,000, then you'd have to sell about 1,000 units just to break even. So it's I mean, obviously, I think because obviously I've changed my mindset a little more and focusing more on titles that are selling more than 1,000 units, like the Tsukamoto films. But maybe it's better than some of the sales. But there are still the minor titles like films like Melancholic or something. That's like 500 copies sold like over like 3-4 years, so that they don't even break even.
I figured Melancholic would be a big seller for you. Anyway, sorry. Maybe my perception is skewed because I like these movies. I don't know.
Yes, that is it. I think you'd think that they would sell more than that, but unfortunately, they don't. I mean, obviously, I think the collectors market is also maybe become so popular nowadays, especially with companies like Arrow putting like 10 films out a month. That obviously collectors don't have time to watch these films and don't have the money to buy a lot of titles, and are more focused on the sort of limited editions than they are like standard editions, maybe. But you can't put like it's hard to think about putting out like a limited edition of a film like Melancholic, because I'd rather sort of have the retail price lower so that people can take a chance on a small Japanese film. But yes, if you make a limited edition, then you have to put it out for a little more, and that has to be a title like a Tsukamoto film that people are more willing to buy. So it's complicated, yeah, trying to weigh everything up. And yeah, I mean, the market seems like it's bigger nowadays because companies like Arrow are doing so well. But I think that it does mainly come down to like films like RoboCop or like the Arrow films that are or June or some major title, not like these minor Japanese or Asian films.
Huh. I had heard from Jason what an honest and kind of candid person you were. It's really humbling to hear it. I think I thank you for answering my question so honestly. It's this is a side that I don't think many people listening and myself certainly don't get to hear that much. It's a fascinating glimpse into what's going on behind when we're making a decision whether or not to buy one of your titles. Like I think it's so that's one thing I love about these interviews is like it's not just buying Hiroku the Goblin. It's like, oh, okay, I'm supporting Adam, or like it's like it's different after having speaking to you, and I'm hoping that as people hear this and having heard you and your honesty and passion in this. The only other question I really have, I guess, is looking forward. Can you talk at all about kind of what's coming up this year? I know you've released some information, but I mean, is there anything you want to highlight or kind of focus on as far as what people should be expecting?
Yeah, I mean, right now, yeah, there's Crazy Thunder Road is out this month. It's already been announced, and Funky Forest and Warp Forest, which was working with Arrow 4444 in America, and that was quite a it was quite a stressful situation for me because I had to subtitle so much, yeah, on that. I mean, like including like an audio commentary by all three directors speaking over each other for 150 minutes. And I was sitting there when they were doing that and I was going, really, this is going to take like a month to subtitle. And it did take a month to subtitle. So at least it didn't cost anything. It just took my time and my sanity for a while. But
sorry, just really quick. You do all the subtitling as well? I know you've kind of mentioned that in passing, but you're fluent enough in Japanese to where you can, well, wait, no, Funky Forest is, yeah. I mean, you can actually do all the subtitling as well?
Yeah, I mean, the features are obviously, subtitled for all these films initially, but yes, the extra features, including actually, the majority of the time I make the extra features, I bring my laptop and I bring the director into this tiny room here and I say like, can you speak over this and don't pause in between because then I'll have to do some more editing or something like that. So again, let's just speak the whole time and then I'll subtitle it myself. Yeah, I mean, subtitling can get very expensive if you were to hire a company out, and I can do obviously the technical side as well as the my Japanese is obviously good enough to do it. So including all the majority of bonus features on my discs, whether they be interviews with the directors or audio commentaries, yes, are filmed by me, which is I did just buy a better camera because I was using some awful cheap camcorder for a while and always having warning screens at the beginning of them saying like, I'm sorry, this is very bad quality, but like there was something wrong with the lighting or something, maybe actually just a shit camera. But yes, I do that and I edit them myself, which is why they're quite simply edited, and then make the subtitles on top. So it cuts all the costs for everything down. So yeah, it's yeah, but yeah, Funky Forest was one that and What Forest, which we made lots of extra features, or I made lots of extra features for, and then coming up, yes, I've got a film called Zoki, which is one of these small Japanese films that's only going to sell about 500 copies, but well, what can you do? And then Onoda, which was in Cannes, actually. It's quite a big film that I've taken on, and I'm a bit regretting that because it's a French film, and they're about as painful to work with as the Japanese. So I, I'm trying to put that in cinemas and in Blu-ray in May, and then after that, I announced this, but I've been still going through the contract situation because it's a bloody pain in the ass. But yes, the Obayashi film, 4 films from the 80s, School in the Crosshairs, and The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, and his motorcycle, Her Island, and Island Nearest Paradise. These are actually films that I had been trying to acquire for years, and I got so pissed off with the sales agent Kadokawa that I stopped. But because I put so much effort into working with Obayashi, that I did the anti-war trilogy because it was a lot easier titles to acquire. So it was that came out from the stress of trying to deal with these 80s films. And once I did the anti-war trilogy, I thought, I'm going to go back to Kadokawa and try it again. And I did it. And then I thought it was all done. And now I'm having more problems with the bloody contract. So I'm sure they'll get released, but it's going to cost me a lot more than I expected to. So that'll be another box set later this year, plus Shion Sono Suicide Club. This is another title that also, to be very frank, that I'm sure somebody would release it anyway, and I don't really feel the need for me to release it, but I'm sure because I've released so many Shion Sono films that it'll be a good seller, and then maybe I can find some tiny little Japanese film to bounce off that. And otherwise, I've been trying to work recently on remastering some titles from Katsui Tuishi, who did Funky Forest. His films Party 7 and Sharkskin Man and Peach Hip Girl. That's something that I've been trying to remaster, but it's been a very complicated situation with the sales agent as well as it always is, and I've had to sell these films and to raise money to remaster them in Japan. So it's a complicated thing that should happen, but I can't say for sure whether it will or not. And there are some other instances with other films that I've been trying to remaster, but in order to remaster them, I've had to work as a sales agent on behalf of the sales company to get money from other distributors so that they can be used to remaster. And I get obviously nothing from this, no commission, and not even I still have to pay for the rights to the UK. But in order to get these films remastered, I have to sell them, and then I'll probably have to bring them to film festivals as well just to get the money that is being used to remaster them. So it's a lot of work for I get the smallest slice of the pie in the end.
It's interesting. We had a conversation with one of the, I don't know if you know Jared from Mondo Macabro, but we had a conversation with him recently, and he was saying, we were talking about some Indonesian films that they had put out years ago, and he said, there's some stuff I can't really get into, but for legal reasons, basically, we're not going to be able to put these out on Blu-ray, even though we love these movies and we would like to. But I'm just thinking that the more I hear about rights, acquiring rights and dealing with the rights holders and all that, I feel like it's an underappreciated art to be able to do that, because it just feels like it adds a tremendous amount of unnecessary stress to the process of just trying to get a movie released sometimes.
I mean, luckily, because as I mentioned, me being here and understanding and learning to over the years understand how Japanese think, it's very complicated the way the Japanese think, because we as Westerners, maybe I think, especially in school, I think creativity is quite important. But Japanese school is very rigid and very, very structured, and they don't really like to promote creativity. It's all about just being the same as everyone else. And Japanese companies are the same like that as well. And the way the Japanese companies as a whole work is not like you headhunt somebody who is very knowledgeable about that position. It's more about you taking in young people and bringing them into your company, and so that they can stay there for the rest of their lives, and molding them into subjects of that company, whether or not they're interested in the work that that company is doing. So whether or not they love film or not, they end up in these film companies. And the only reason they make it into let's say the international department is because their English is better than somebody else's. But it's not because they understand the international markets. So me, I mean, I always sort of knew that about Japanese, but being here, you really learn how sort of rigid the society is, and therefore it allows me to work with them in a way that I'm sort of working for them, like knowing that they don't understand the international market and knowing that they have these company rules that are like outdated. It's like, okay, well, if I'm able to release this film, or if I want to release this film, I need to sort of think as they might be thinking, but then also do things they can't do in order to get them to move. Like they can only move from like A to B, so I have to do like C, D, E, and F so that they can move to B. It's sort of like it's incredibly complicated, and it's and it's incredibly stressful because I'm doing this for them so that I can release a film, and I'm paying them to release a film. But in order for me to be able to release that film, I need to like sell it to like other companies to get the money so that they'll allow it to be sold. I mean, because that fits into their rules structure of like only selling a film for like this price or something. So it's really, really painful, and it pisses me off. And I'm always yelling at them like, don't you understand you're killing Japanese cinema? And it's like I'm always ranting, send these long ranted emails, like copy and pasted emails from the last 10 times I sent to other companies, like, don't you guys understand? Like the way you're thinking is like 20 years old, and you if you don't do this, then Japanese cinema is gonna die internationally, and blah 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 blah. But they don't understand. So I sometimes I just have to realize, okay, well, instead of ranting at them, I'll just do all their work for them, and then hopefully that'll get it sorted. So it's a very complicated process, especially with Japanese over, for example, Koreans. Koreans are very different, and Hong Kong as well, because they are a lot more Western minded, and Japan is very much an island nation.
Wow. No, I mean, I'm overwhelmed with your candor throughout this entire interview. It's so refreshing and so fascinating. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you would want me to have asked, or anything that you're thinking of that you wish you would have had a chance to say?
No, I just, every time I'm asked any questions, I always apologize, and I should have done at the beginning, but I tend to go on these incredible tangents and rant on for ages, and were I to listen back, I might think that that doesn't make any sense, or I wonder if anybody who's listening is understanding what I'm saying and if you're following me. So I always always remember to apologize, and that's I do apologize if I've gone off on one, and you don't understand what I'm speaking about, and maybe it doesn't make any sense, and yes, I apologize.
That's 100% not how I experienced this conversation. I understood you very clearly, and I think you're bringing a perspective of wisdom, and I sense, I've heard one time there was a quote that said something to the effect of, in frustration is latent optimism. So basically, like, in order to get frustrated at a process, you actually have to be an optimist, because you have to believe that there is a right way of doing things, and people will do it, and therefore you can continue to get frustrated when it's not being done the right way. And so in that sense, I see you as a very optimistic person who's trying to do things the right way, even despite having a lot of obstacles over almost 17 years now of having your own company.
Yeah, a lot less hair, that's for sure.
Well, I will make, what is the best way to help you to buy from your web store?
Well, because I'm based in Japan now, I used to be that I used to just sell stuff from my own house, and run to the post office like 50 times a day. But I can't do that because I'm in Japan now. So what I've done is, the terracotta is a friend of mine called Joey, who we've known each other since we actually both started our own companies around the same time. We've always worked together, and he's a very, very, very passionate guy as well, who also is juggling about 20 things at the same time. And he's selling stuff through his store, the Terracotta online store, which also sells a lot of Asian films, and he packages them very, very, very well, and I think he's got very good customer service. So supporting him is also supporting me, and vice versa. So I always recommend yes, Terracotta distribution or Terracotta online for all my titles.
Perfect. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I have. I really appreciate the time, and yeah, we'll definitely continue to stay in touch.
Thank you.
That wraps up this week's episode of They Live by Film. If you want to read more of our thoughts, visit theylivebyfilm.com. And you can also follow our Letterboxd, Reddit, and Instagram accounts from the links in the description. For now, take care.